Good afternoon and welcome back to the Bellingham City Council Committee meetings. Today's Monday, July 26th, 2021. And this afternoon, we are going to start with the Planning Committee, which is chaired by Councilmember Anderson. So I will turn it over to her.
Thank you, Council President. Joining me today for this will be Councilmember Hamill and Councilmember Knudsen, who will be standing in for Councilmember Huffman on the committee. The summary statement for the bill number 23061 basically is a report on the status of the city's accessory dwelling unit ordinance. Back in 2018, the City Council adopted an ordinance 2018-05-009, which allowed detached accessory dwelling units, ADUs, in all areas. The provision of the ordinance established a threshold for review by the council when 25 detached ADU permits were issued in any one neighborhood. That threshold has been reached with Sunnyland neighborhood. Staff will provide a summary of our experience with the ordinance since 2018. And I see Councilmember Huffman has joined us, so she'll be sitting in on this. And presenting the information will be our planning staff, Greg Alcott. So Greg, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Councilmember Anderson. Good afternoon, members of the council. Greg Alcott, Planning and Community Development Department. Joining me today from our staff is Chris Cook, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I've just got a few slides to show you today. Okay, can everybody see that?
No, we cannot.
You cannot see it. Well, that's not good. Let me try again. How about now?
Yes.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, there we go. Okay, so the city originally allowed accessory dwelling units only attached beginning in 1995. In 2009, we revised the ordinance to allow detached ADUs in a few parts of the city, but not in the residential single zones. The big change came in 2018 when we updated the ADU ordinance, and at staff and the Planning Commission's urging, Council approved an ordinance that allowed detached ADUs in all residential single zones, and we updated some of the development standards at that time. So since 2000, part of the ordinance in 2018 contained a provision that required council review when we met one of these thresholds, either by the end of the year of 2025 or when the city issued 200 ADU permits, detached ADU permits citywide, or when the city issues 25 detached ADU permits in any one particular neighborhood. And that's the third one is the threshold that we have reached, and so that is why we're here today. We've issued 25 permits in the Sunnyland neighborhood, 20 in Columbia, 12 in Cornwall Park, and a total of 96 citywide. Both detached and attached ADU permits, 154 since 2018, twice as many for detached ADUs as for attached. And 2/3 of the detached ADUs have been in single family zones. We went from an average of reviewing an ADU permit once every 2 months to now we're doing about one a week. So it's been a very popular program, and it's taken quite a few staff resources for us to review those. This map shows the location of all of the detached ADUs that have been approved since 2018, and you can see that they are clustered around the older neighborhoods, Columbia, Cornwall Park, Sunnyland, Leonard Streets, some in Roosevelt, a few in Happy Valley and South Hill. And then this map adds the attached ADUs since 2018. So you can see where they're located, both attached and detached ADUs. So we would like council's support for the continuation of detached ADUs being allowed in all of the city's zones. And we want to begin reviewing the ordinance with the Planning Commission, looking at potential revisions with regard to the current standards, the permitting process, affordability provisions, the fees that we charge for ADUs, and consistency with new state legislation. The state just passed some rules regarding ADUs. I mean, we need to update our ordinance to be consistent with state law. We want to look at our review process. It's fairly daunting both for applicants and for staff members. It's a type 2 process. It requires notice to all property owners within 500 feet. It's a fairly lengthy process. And as I said, it's a little daunting for homeowners. Most of the folks who are building ADUs are just property owners. They're not developers. There's an owner occupancy requirement. The property owners have to live on site, either in the main house or the ADU, regardless of where it's built. So we want to review whether or not that makes sense to continue that requirement in residential multi-zones. We'll look at the parking requirements. One space is required for the ADU. Some say that's not enough. Some say that's too much, and it limits folks from being able to build an ADU if they have a small lot. We want to look at the fees that we currently charge, both connection fees and impact fees. And then we want to look at the development regulations as well, the height limits and so forth. So there are a number of provisions that we want to review with the Planning Commission and come back to you this fall with some recommendations regarding potential changes to the ordinance. And with that, I will close the staff presentation, and Chris and I are here to answer any questions that you have.
Wonderful. And Greg, if you could stop sharing your screen for a moment so that we can see all council members, I'd appreciate that. Thank you very much. Committee members, are there any questions or comments before I open it to the rest of council? Councilmember Hamel?
Yeah, I read an article in the New York Times this morning that was a great reminder that the cost of homelessness is based on structural issues within zoning in particular, and housing affordability in general. And we know that from the Department of Commerce that anytime a community's rents go up by $100, homelessness goes up by 6%. And we're certainly seeing that we're bearing witness to that right now. So all that by way of saying, I would like to make it as easy as possible when it makes sense for an owner to convert a mother-in-law or a carriage house or any other type of accessory dwelling unit into an ADU. So I'm going to make a series of motions here this afternoon to essentially direct the staff to come back with an ordinance under the staff recommendation number 2, and I'm going to use the identified bullet points on page 124 of your packet well, I'll see if I can get 2 or more votes to make that happen. And I'll stop talking.
Thank you. Councilmember Huffman.
I just wanted to say quickly, I support staff coming back with recommendations regarding these suggestions. I walk my dog a lot, and I like to walk in alleys around my neighborhood and other neighborhoods. And I love looking at the new DADUs that are popping up. They make our alleyways a lot more pleasant, and people take care of them. And it's kind of a new home front in making our walkways more interesting and also adding density. And I'm in favor of making ADUs a little bit easier to build.
Thank you. So I'll open it up. Councilmember Vargas, you had your hand up.
Thank you so much for including us. I am so happy to see this come forward. I've been wanting it to come forward for a while, so I'm really glad we've met that criteria. I am very supportive. Going back a couple of years ago, I was a very big advocate for including all the things we're looking at now. I thought we should have done those years ago, but the community was not ready for it. But I think everyone is ready for it now. And, certainly a type 2 design or for use permit is so much easier. Eliminating owner occupy requirement will change many, many things. And certainly I don't think we need the parking requirement. We need to start thinking about our future and planning that way. And so I think updating these things as soon as possible to help our density, to eliminate barriers. I know I've heard from people who have tried to do things, but the parking requirement was such a barrier. The owner occupancy was a barrier. So we could probably have almost double the numbers we have now. Saying that, you mentioned, Greg, also the staff requirements. A couple of years ago, when I went and visited the planning and permitting department in San Francisco, because they had done a huge initiative around ADUs, and I asked them how they were making it happen. And they said they had a dedicated person on their staff that's what they did to move ADUs forward as soon as possible. So maybe that's something that we could look at in regards to resources and time, is adding a person that is dedicated to moving ADUs forward, DADUs, ADUs. So that is what I would love to see. And I'd love to see us get this all done by the end of the year so I can vote on it. Thanks.
Okay. I'm going to kind of go around with everyone and then come back to Councilmember Hamel. I see your hand up, but I figured you're probably going to make some motions, and I'd like to speak to this before you do. But I'd like to recognize Councilmember Lillquist before I speak.
Thanks for letting me speak. Just to telegraph, in general, I'm definitely in support of the staff continuing to look at these ordinances, particularly to kind of figure out where they're not working, where people are kind of trying to game the system. One of the biggest concerns that community members have has to do always with size limits and the number of people and the impacts that come with that. And I'm wondering if I could hear a little bit from the staff. It was mentioned in the memo that new state law now makes it required to do what we're moving towards, which is to no longer rely upon how we define family to define occupancy, and rather instead to rely upon sort of the size of the dwelling unit, right? If you have this many people are allowed in a dwelling unit because it's this big. Sorry, I'm not speaking eloquently, but can staff please respond to what their thinking is on what possible changes there might be to the size rules for ADUs and then also the occupancy limits for ADUs? Because I think that's an important issue because it has to do with kind of the scale of the impact that people might expect.
Yeah, Michael, I don't think we're at the point where we're ready to recommend whether or not the occupancy should be limited by square footage or some other method. We need to do some additional work on that. And Rick, before he left, had actually started reviewing the family definition in our code, and it presented some options to the Planning Commission. So that will be coming to you very soon, and that will obviously impact ADUs as well. But we're not quite at the point where we're ready to recommend a method for limiting the occupancy.
Thank you. I'd like to take a moment and cover a couple of my ideas and concerns that I would want to see come back when this is reviewed. First is the height increase. I do have concerns about that. I served on the Planning Commission when this came through, and I was kind of outnumbered on some of the viewpoints. At first, it started out to be affordability, and I was like, great, let's require affordability, and then that got dropped. So I still cling to that hope that increasing ADUs is actually not going to be market rate level, but it will, because people will charge what they can get. And we know in Bellingham it's way too much. So one concern is height. There are older neighborhoods that have what I call shotgun property, where they're very narrow but long. And when you have 1930 bungalows, and if we go up to 25 feet, and if you have that on either side, you are shading out people's their gardens. And I have a very strong concern about that. We kind of went with this plan, a one size fits all, to make it really easy for the planning department. And I thought we lost a lot of opportunity, where maybe larger lots could hold a larger ADU and smaller lots couldn't afford the same in order to still create the livability for those neighbors. So I do have concerns unless we put in some more design standards about window placement for privacy, or where they're situated on a lot, to ensure that people who are growing their food gardens or enjoy their backyard and seeing a little sun once in a while, or they're installing solar panels, those will be able to be considered. I would like to hear what some of the concerns are because I do know some people have filed complaints about ADUs coming forward, and what were the impacts that they were concerned about. And if there's anything that we can design in order to try to mitigate, not a one-off, but if we're seeing a trend of people saying, my sunlight is being blocked, what can we do about that? I also agree with Councilmember Lillquist that I would really like to see a square footage ratio in order to ensure, not limit how many people overall is in a dwelling. We have some very large houses that could accommodate large collections of, self-designated family or friends, but smaller units. I mean, there's a certain level of health and safety that we really need to consider as we're looking at how many people can move into a space. And then another area is the non-owner occupied. I know you're looking at the multifamily, but I also know that the ADU was first a pilot program for a neighborhood, and it went to Planning Commission and got blown up across all neighborhoods without what I felt was proper notification during the summer, when a lot of people weren't aware it was happening. I want to avoid that again and have proper notification. So if we are looking at expanding it, and I sometimes really hesitate multifamily being treated differently than single family. So, we need to look at best practices. But if we were going to look at non-owner occupied, I really would like to see, because I feel it's an upzone. We are giving people the opportunity to speculate and develop their properties. So if the house next door to me, which is single family, somebody buys it as a rental, knowing that they can build a detached ADU, which basically makes it 2 living units, they don't live there. I would really like to see a mechanism that detached ADU that is not owner occupied land has an affordability requirement on there, so that we can bring in some affordable housing. It's just not about different structures and different types, but we need to get creative about when we are giving to developers and investors and housing, that we're getting something back other than just another living unit, especially when they're not in our urban village and along our main transportation corridors. So I would like to look at the legality and a mechanism that if it's not owner occupied, that there's a requirement for like a 10-year period that is considered affordable if it's not a family member living there. But those are a few ideas to throw out. Parking, I have concerns about that too, because I live in a very dense area where we don't have limits on how many people are in a house. And next door to me, they wiped out their front lawn to fit the 10 cars there from their residents for a single family neighborhood. So not all neighborhoods can sustain no parking requirements. And then the last question, I know this was asked a lot, and I didn't have a chance to research all the video from the council previously, But one of the requests that has been made a lot from community members, I know I requested it and I'll want to request it again at some point. Is there an assessment or survey of how many detached ADUs are out there right now that were not permitted originally, but they're probably grandfathered in? I notice York shows two, one detached and one attached. And if you want to come to my house, I'll take you down an alley and show you 4 within a half block of me. So there's a lot more detached and attached ADUs than what is showing on this map. And I think it would be very helpful as we're making decisions on parking and other aspects that we know what we have in our community. So if you can maybe let me know if that was ever done or directed by council, that will help frame some of my information request. But giving you a heads up, I will request it when it comes before us if that's something that wasn't undertaken. So with that said, I am going to go back and recognize Councilmember Hamel to maybe start his motions.
I noticed that Councilmember Vargas has her hand up too. I'm willing to wait for just a moment.
Perfectly fine. I wanted to recognize you because I said I would circle back to you and you've been waiting. But definitely Councilmember Vargas, since Hamel has yielded to you.
Thank you so much. Just a quick comments to a couple things that you said, Councilmember Anderson. I will tell you that when we went through this process initially, we did all of those things that you suggested. I walked through everybody's neighborhoods. I saw all the old ADUs. So I am completely aware, and I think many of the other council members who have been here for a while have also done that walk. Actually, I did it with Harriet Spinell the first time, so she knew her neighborhood. So we are very aware of what happened before us. What we have to look at now is the future. And one of the things that Gregory showed us is that these are not being built by developers. And that is the myth that everybody likes to carry on, that these are by homeowners, individual people who own homes or a couple homes. And that's who we have now shown proven track record, because everybody used to say, oh, it's developers. And now we have the evidence and the proof that it's not, that it's local homeowners that are building ADUs and trying to have an opportunity for density, possibly their families, etc. So just know that we are always willing to look at things, but we have been down a lot of these roads over and over and over again. And I think it's time for us to look at our future and do what we're supposed to do, which is increase capacity and meet our numbers in our comprehensive plan about how we are going to find homes for everybody who wants to live here, because we already don't have enough homes for people. So I'm going to turn this over to Dan. I just wanted to let you know that we have certainly done our due diligence on this for many, many years. So I'm really excited about us moving forward.
And before turning over to Dan, I'm going to do a counterpoint. If we're looking at non-owner occupied, that's my concern. And I'd like to have that information before we make that decision so that we know what's there. And I think the rental licensing would be a good place to pull data, because if they're licensing it, it's not difficult to figure out from the auditor's office if it's owner occupied. I actually know a couple that are not in very close proximity to me that were grandfathered in. But Councilmember.
Oh, okay. Did Councilmember Vargas? No. Okay. I'm sorry. Everyone's being very polite today, which is great. So I'm going to make a motion to allow ADUs by right using the Type 1 land use permit process. And motions in committee don't require a second.
Okay, we have a motion before us to allow as a Type 1 process ADUs. So council members, please vote before I call the vote. Councilmember Lilliquist, sorry, you're shaking your hand.
Take yourself off mute.
You're muted.
I'm sorry. I think the motion is to direct staff to develop the ordinance, not to actually cause this to happen. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is pursuant, like I said before, this is pursuant to item 2 on page 125, and that's for directing staff to bring back an ordinance. What I'm saying is that in that ordinance, I'm asking to include allowing ADUs by right using the type 1 land use permit process. So thanks for clarifying, Councilmember.
Thank you, because I was going to vote no, because I figured this has to go before the full council versus us making that recommendation. So can I ask a question of you, Councilmember Hamel? Do you want to make your motions independently, or since this is directing staff to draft, do you want to combine all of them together? What would be your preference?
I don't know that I can get enough votes if I do them all together because of how I'm going to do the motion. So I would rather just do them. I've just got probably 6 motions here, 5 or 6.
Okay. So the first motion is to direct staff to bring back a draft ordinance that would change the ADU permitting requirement from a type 2 process to a type 1.
That's correct.
Okay. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. So that passes and will be recommended to council tonight 2-1.
Okay. My next motion is to remove the owner occupancy requirement. I really don't think that the zoning needs to be segregated. So I'm going to say in all neighborhoods, regardless of zoning. I do like Councilmember Anderson's idea of providing for affordability. So I'm going to say that in that ordinance that we're directing staff to come back and with removing the owner occupancy requirement. So the property owner does not have to live on site. And I would like to include that if that is the case, if the owner's not on site, that the ADU or the home is at 80% AMI for a 10-year period.
Okay, before bringing that to vote, I see our legal counsel, Mr. Mariner, has put his hand up. Would you like to speak to that?
Well, I just want to make sure council understands this is a change to our development regulations. It's got to go through a type 6 process. The first step in that is a public hearing before the planning commission. So just to be clear, when you're directing staff to bring forward ordinances, they're not going to come directly to you. They'll go to the planning commission. And I guess I was hoping planning would weigh in. I thought I heard something about a plan to bring something for already in existence to bring forward to the planning commission. So I just want to make sure we're not getting ahead, the council is not getting ahead of itself. The ordinance, staff cannot bring back these ordinances that you're making a motion on directly to you. There's a bigger process, and that's because we're making changes to our development regulations.
That's right.
So I would support Dan's motion, understanding that some of these might take a longer process in order to be able to be brought before us. But I know for myself, I'm extremely committed to creating as much affordability as we can. And if we are doing what I personally feel is an upzone to non-owner occupied housing in order to create 2 rental units, I think the city should benefit from that other than just an additional dwelling unit. So Dan, with the understanding that it would have to be a type 6 process, are you still okay with that motion, knowing that there would be a delay?
What is the timeline for a type 6 process?
So there's a notice requirement, a 30-day notice requirement prior to planning commission public hearing. The planning commission will develop findings and recommendations that would come to council. There would be a 30-day notice before a council public hearing before final action on the ordinance. So it's several months.
Hey, Greg, can you comment on what you were planning already? I thought you were already planning to take something to the planning commission. Normally, you take ideas to the planning commission. They're the ones that sort of flush it out and figure out a direction and then make a recommendation to city council. Seems like we're sort of in a way bypassing the planning commission process by saying this is specifically what we want. I just wonder whether your guidance should be a little more general, like consider these things versus bring back an ordinance that specifically says this. I would just caution you that the planning commission inclusion in this process is a requirement under state law and our code. And it just seems like we're sort of leaving them out of the process. I think it's okay to give them some guidance, but I would hope that it'd be a little more general.
Yeah, if you read our memo, when we're talking about it says topics for further discussion, and consider reviewing the parking requirements. Consider look at the fee structure. Our intent was just to identify some areas that we wanted to review, beginning with the Planning Commission. We weren't looking for council approval or denial of any of these, other than to confirm the city's continued support of detached ADUs in all residential zones, and then direct staff to bring back an ordinance with a range of amendment options intended to improve ADU standards, permitting process, affordability, and consistency with state law. So you're right, Alan. We weren't looking for a thumbs up or thumbs down on any of these issues. We were just highlighting that we're going to go to the Planning Commission and begin discussing potential changes to the ordinance.
Okay. I see Elizabeth Oakes has her hand up, and so I'm assuming there's a question on process here. Elizabeth, would you like to ask?
Thank you, Lisa. I'm wondering, Dan had made a motion about something about the 80% AMI. Could he clarify that again?
Area median income.
Thank you.
That's what Culshan CLT, that's their threshold. That's workforce housing. It's at the lower AMI for workforce, rather.
Before I recognize another council member, since we're kind of working through this, Dan, is there any changes or amendment in the direction you're pursuing with your recommendations or your motions after what Greg and Alan had shared? Or would you like to let your motion stand and we vote?
I'd like to go through the motion process, and I'm happy to I mean, it doesn't matter if I'm happy about it or not. The Type 6 process is going to happen. I was just curious about the timeline, and I want to make sure that we are that we're just, solid when it comes to this process.
Yeah, and I think a few months to get something right is a small investment overall. It's been out there long enough, and it wasn't going to be reviewed until 2025 automatically and without the threshold. So anyway, Councilmember Vargas, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to ask the same thing of Dan, of what Greg said, if he wanted to change it. But I just wanted to speak to, what Alan and Greg said, is that, yes, we definitely have to respect the planning committee's process around this. However, I think it is important that we do make a statement, like Dan is doing with these votes here, to say the direction that we are looking for, and that we hope that we can update our ADUs, and that this is what we are hoping for. So I think it is fair for us to make these statements so they are clear the direction that the policy that the council wants to put forth in regards to ADUs. So I think that it is relevant for us to share this information with the Planning Commission so they are clear where we stand in regards to how we want to go forward.
I'd like to just comment on that. Council Member Hamill, it'd be better for the process, as the way the process is supposed to work, if the motion was consider direction for Planning Commission to consider these elements in an ordinance amending the ADU chapter of the BMC and list those items, versus specifically saying bring back an ordinance that does exactly this, because otherwise you're sort of, why go to the Planning Commission? But I think it's okay to give the direction as Councilmember Vargas has said, but I think it could be a little less, bring back the ordinance versus we'd like to see the Planning Commission consider these elements in an ordinance amending the ADU chapter.
Do you have language that I can use so I can provide my intent and direction here with these items?
Well, it'll be that City Council would like the Planning Commission to consider changes to the ADU ordinance and then, go through your list.
Okay. What Mr. Mariner just said.
If I can take a quick moment. And Dan, this is why I voted no on number 1, is because I don't feel it's been thoroughly vetted. I would want things to go through the public process and with planning. I always think there's benefits and pitfalls, and I'd like those to be identified. It's not that I'm against changing it. I feel like I don't have enough information to say I want it changed without that information being fully brought forward. So I do feel that changing the language to provide direction will make it easier for me to support those with yes votes, because otherwise I might be going no through the line and giving the wrong impression that I don't support any of it. I just really would like to have the process followed so that all the hearings happen and we come out with a good product coming before us. And then we could tear it apart if needed. But I will recognize Mr. Alcott one more time, and then we'll get through all your motions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to say, we've identified these 7 items that we want to review with the Planning Commission, and it might be most helpful for council to let us know if there's any that are missing that we could add to this list. Are there other issues that you would like us to consider with the Planning Commission? Because these 7 are the ones that staff is going to bring forward. So while it's nice to know where the council stands, I'm not sure that the votes are necessary at this point, and maybe the time would be better spent identifying anything that you think might be missing from this list.
Affordability, that's mine. Okay, so Councilmember Hamel, please continue.
Okay. Yeah, and I do want to use strong language here because I do want both the staff and the Planning Commission to understand at least my perspective, and if others want to follow suit, then that's, everyone can vote the way they want. So in the strongest possible terms, I guess we're on to the next one, correct? The parking requirement. Kind of lost my place here. Yeah.
We have not voted on the first one or the last one. I can repeat that motion.
Oh, right. Okay. Can you repeat the motion in language that will please the city attorney?
Sure. What I wrote was Dan Hamel moved to direct the Planning Commission to consider changes that would remove the owner occupancy requirements and bring up the AMI to 80% in the ordinance.
Mr. Mariner, are you okay with that language?
Yes.
Okay, and
Okay.
I'm not going to repeat it because Ms. Oakes did a fantastic job, but okay, one more hand before we vote. Councilmember Lillquist.
I think it's a good idea to take Greg's suggestion, Dan, perhaps when you make your motions. We know what the staff recommendation is. If there's parts you want to change to their recommendations, that'd be really helpful. Me personally, I really appreciate the change you just introduced on the owner occupancy requirement. I actually think owner occupancy is an important protection in many regards, but your mechanism, I think, addresses an important concern in a potentially very successful way. So if you could highlight how you might add to the staff's recommendations, I think that'd be really powerful.
And Mr. Alcott, you still have your hand up. Was there something you would like to add?
No, sorry. Let me lower my hand.
Okay, so unless it's changed, we have a motion before us as stated by Ms. Oakes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, sorry. So that passes 3-1. Mr. Hamel?
Okay. Next one is parking requirement. So my intent here is to encourage the development of one on-site parking stall. I don't know how you can do that through the ordinance, but I don't want to require it. And so I want to remove the parking requirement, but still try to encourage the development of the single parking stall. And I didn't write down the language that Mr. Mariner asked me to use, but to have the Planning Commission review or produce an ordinance that includes that item.
And before we vote, I'm just going to share I'm not supporting that as far as to encourage, because nobody does anything encouraged. I would prefer, and this will be what I bring up when it comes before council, that if they can demonstrate sufficient parking availability near the residence, then they can request the parking to be dropped. But if they cannot demonstrate sufficient parking is available near, then the parking would be required. So that's going to be my thoughts when it comes forward, just as a heads up. Councilmember Huffman.
Thank you. I'll be supporting this. I think we're in desperate need of places for people. We're not in desperate need of places for cars. And so a good analysis of that need, I think, is really important here.
Okay. So we have a motion before us to encourage the parking, but not require it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All of those opposed, nay. That is 2-1. Mr. Hamill.
Next item is fees. Or no, is plans. I'm going to skip that one. I'm going to go to fees here. What I'd like to do, so we don't get the school impact fee. That goes directly to the school district. So that being exempt doesn't really matter to me. The park impact fees, I'd like to reduce to 1/4 of the multifamily rate, and transportation impact fees reduced by half their current amount. And I'd like to direct the Planning Commission to produce and review an ordinance through the Type 6 process pursuant to those items.
Mr. Alcott, can I ask a question? I know for ADUs that certain fees and costs were reduced originally for the ADUs coming through. Could you speak to what those were as far as how they were already reduced? Or if my memory's not quite right, but I was pretty sure there were reductions on some of the costs for ADUs.
There were we don't charge school impact fees, obviously. Park impact fees are reduced, and transportation impact fees are also reduced. I don't remember by how much. And then with system development charges, those are only charged if the development of the ADU requires a larger water hookup. So in not every case are the system development charges assessed, but sometimes they are. So we can provide more detailed information when it comes back to you.
And Mr. Hamill, can I ask for clarification? Are you wanting to reduce it to 1/4 fee based on the standard fee for the development, or 1/4 down to 1/4 from the current fee, knowing that it's already been reduced?
The latter. The latter.
1/4 to what it is currently. Okay. Mr. Mariner, you have your hand up.
Yeah, this whole process is making me really uncomfortable because you're making very specific requests. I mean, it's almost like we're at the end of the Type 6 process and you're deciding what the final ordinance should look like. And we're just at the beginning of the process. And as Greg has said, they were just looking for some general direction to review these various bullet point items in the memo. And if there were other ones that they were missing, that they would add to them. And what council is doing now is almost dictating to the Planning Commission what the final ordinance should look like when we haven't even started the Type 6 process yet. So we're going beyond what was asked for, the direction that the staff asked for in the agenda bill, and we're almost telling the Planning Commission specifically what the final ordinance should look like. And that sort of does away with the whole type 6 process, which is a public process that includes the public to arrive at the final ordinance. And it feels like we're telling the Planning Commission right now what that final ordinance should look like in no uncertain terms. And council can do whatever they want, but that's not what was intended by this agenda bill, nor what it was intended by the type 6 process.
I'm going to recognize Council Member Hamel.
Listen, I want to respond. I completely disagree with what the city attorney just provided. What I'm trying to do here is provide as specific as possible a draft ordinance that for consideration for the Planning Commission, ultimately the City Council, that would include these, you're right, very specific components. I don't want a vague ordinance to come back to us or go to the Planning Commission and have them not include these items. And what I'm trying to do here is what I thought the staff said in this agenda bill, that bring back an ordinance with a range of amendment options intended to improve ADU standards, permitting process, affordability, et cetera. So I think we're doing exactly that. And I don't want a work product to be worked on by another body where it's not going to be, I'm not going to vote for it. So I'm trying to be specific here. And Councilmember Huffman and Vargas are right. We need housing. This is timely. It's very important. And I know this isn't going to solve everything. This is one item, but it does need to come back as clean as possible. And that's my intent.
Councilmember Lilliquist.
Thank you. I'm going to speak up for City Council prerogative too. But I do think that there's not that much disagreement here, really. It's a matter of nuance. I think what Mr. Hamill is saying is that he has specific ideas that the City Council wants to be evaluated by the Planning Commission, which is not the same thing as telling the Planning Commission they need to approve those ideas. They want to make sure that, or the motion is to make sure that these ideas are included in what the Planning Commission sees. I think that's a way of respecting the process, but still being specific. I'm not sure I'll agree with the final form of all these recommendations. There's a lot to discuss, but I think it's appropriate that we be specific in what we want the Planning Commission and the Type 6 process to include.
I see staff, Elizabeth Oakes, your hand is up. Can provide some clarification for you.
Thank you. The last motion Dan made was about something about a current feed from down to 0.25%. Dan, can you tell me the language? I know you were reading from somewhere, but I couldn't find it.
Sure. So basically, my intent here is to reduce the upfront cost of development, and so to that end, to reduce the park impact fees that are currently assessed at 1/2 of the multifamily rate. So just to reduce that to 1/4. Okay.
And what page was that on that you were?
Sorry, 124, packet page 124. It's the second bullet item from the bottom. And then transportation impact fees reduced to 50% of what the current value is, or current charge.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And I'll speak to this very quickly. I will not be supporting it, but not that I am opposed to reducing the fees. I just would like to know what they're already reduced and what that would look like to reduce them further. And I also do believe that there are things that we need to look at and hear from, like transportation and parks, about basically the more people using parks, there's impacts on that. So I would like to be able to do an informed decision making on whether or not that reduction is too far or perhaps not enough. And I think that would come out of the process of information provided to the Planning Commission. So I would want to see that before I am so specific about the amount. If we hadn't reduced it already, I might feel a little bit differently, but if it's already been reduced down to 1/4 amount, going another quarter is so nominal that, do we want to consider none? So there's information lacking for me to make an informed decision on this. So that's why I'd vote no. So with that said, Yes, sorry about that. Councilmember Huffman.
So I'll just quickly say I'll be supporting this just because I want to see that analysis and I want the discussion and to see what the recommendation at the end of it is.
Thank you. So all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? No. That passes 2-1 to go to council. So Councilmember Hamel.
All right. Last one here. We're taking forever on this one. Sorry about this. I'm going to make a motion to direct the Planning Commission to produce and review an ordinance that includes increasing the height from 20 feet for height limit to 25 feet for DADUs.
Okay. Any additional comments? Okay. Again, not opposed. I have spoken as far as where my main concerns are, and I would want to see that analysis on impacts and maybe alternatives for height. Again, I keep thinking if we get very specific, we're losing opportunity because the ADUs are 800 feet. And in some areas that might be able to have an ADU that's 1,000, but it's shorter because it's not going to shade people out. I would really love to see some different types of sizing and square footage options becoming available based on square footage of land and types of housing around it. So at this point, it's not enough information for me without it going through the planning to be developed. So I'll be voting no, but again, not opposed to it. I just want more information. I think we could have sent this to them saying we recommend you looking at it and other options, but without that other options in there in order to possibly increase square footage where appropriate. I think we're missing something, but I will make another motion when we're done here to add some things. So if there are no other comments or questions, I will ask for all those in support as motioned by Councilmember Hamel, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No? Okay. So I do have my own. I don't think I'm going to make it an emotion, but providing there's no, on one of them, contrary thoughts. I do think there is an extreme value on some pre-approved plans. I personally think that is a wonderful way to go in order to reduce costs for development. And so maybe I better make a motion. I make a motion to recommend to the planning department to submit to the Planning Commission the ideas and possibilities of adopting pre-approved plans based on size of lot development, being that perhaps a plan for an example, a garage in a 3,000 square foot property versus a 20,000 square foot. So a few different plans based on different possibilities within our land development. And since we don't need a second, yes, Councilmember Hamel.
And so the intent is to perhaps make the development of an ADU slightly less expensive?
Yes.
Okay.
If you can go to the planning department and they say, here's 4 plans that are approved. We know these work, this works in Birchwood, this works in York and Seaholm based on the size, carriage house versus a freestanding. And you don't have to pay that architect. You don't have to pay certain things. You can just go get those plans and know that they're pre-approved. That's going to take less work for you to get through the process and less design elements. So if we have that ability to have pre-approved plans, I assume it's going to be a cost reduction for somebody who wants to put something in. We're doing some of the work for them. Councilmember Huffman.
If I'm not mistaken, that's something that works really well in some other communities and will make things more affordable and make the process move more quickly. Again, into exploring any options that strengthen this program and make it more accessible and affordable. So I will support that.
Great. So with no other comments, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Great, that's 3-1. And then, oh, I know there was something else I was going to say and I just lost it, so I apologize. So if there, and Ms. Oakes, if I can maybe get a document so I could read this out tonight, since there were so many motions to call, I've been furiously taking notes and I know I've probably messed up a couple of them. I would really appreciate that email.
No problem.
Thank you very much. So if there is nothing further on this, then I will turn it back over to Council President Stone.